Boxing Lowdown, and welcome to episode 3 of the Boxing Lowdown podcast. I'm delighted once again to be joined by my dad. How's it going? How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm good, man. How are you? Yeah, I'm not too bad.
Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you for joining the podcast last time out. Got some good responses on there, some good views, and it's good to have you on to share your opinion and even different opinions at times. I think is good because it allows the boxing community to debate, which is what we want.
Absolutely, yeah. You know what? I watched the show back a couple of times because that's the type of person I am. I like to see how things went. And I also observed some of the comments.
We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
Let's get into that now.
Yeah,
let's get into that now, man. Because some of the I posted it obviously online, got a lot of comments and stuff, and you know what? A lot of people were like in agreement with what you were saying. You got a lot of positive comments. They were like, "Look, your dad, he knows a lot, man. Your dad knows this and that." So I was like, "Yeah, he does." But then there were some other comments as well, particularly around Lomachenko. Now, as you are aware, in the last episode, you was quite harsh, according to some, on Lomachenko. And for those that haven't seen it, here is the clip of some of Laurie's comments on Lomachenko last weekend.
To say that after watching that on Saturday, man, I can no longer consider Lomachenko an elite fighter. I'm sorry, can't.
Well, hold on. Are we going over the top here? Because what someone will say to you is that it's only one fight. The greats all lost before.
I'm glad you made that point, actually. I'm glad you brought that up because if we're being honest, it's not just the one fight, is it? When was the other fight that he was taken out of his comfort zone?
Orlando Salido, 2014.
Yeah, great fighters, the Pacquiaos, the Mayweathers, the Leonard, the Hearns, the Durans, the Haglers. I could go on and on. They all had what I call a gut check, and they came through it. To me, Lomachenko's had 2 gut checks, man. He's not passed any of them. So
there you go, man. I mean, let me get into some of the comments, man. Some of the comments of what some people said with regards to last week's podcast. Now, one person here commented, tad harsh. I think he had a gut check against Linares and he came through that with flying colours. I just think that he's ventured a bit too far from his original weight class. And then another one here, it says, dropped by Linares. He passed that gut check. No need for all of this Loma hate. In 16 fights, he fought 10 reigning world champions in 15 world title fights. He's still a phenom. Loma is still one of the best in this generation. Lopez is just the next generation. So what's your response to those comments? I think a lot of the thing was around you saying him being elite or not as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I watched the show back, like I said, and obviously to some people, they may consider that harsh. But you know what it is? When you're judging fighters of that ilk, you have to judge them by the harshest standards because, these guys are basically setting the tone. Now, listen, I want to say, I did say on the show previously that Lomachenko he's certainly in the conversation as being the best amateur of all time. I also described him on your show last week as a great fighter. What I said was I didn't think he was an all-time great or an elite based on what I've seen and based on the losses he's had. I mean, you can't write out. I know some of the Loma, the Loma fanboys, for want of a better word.
I've heard a lot of words. I've heard Loma fanboys.
Yeah, I mean,
homosexual.
I don't think we should do that on this show, to be honest. But yeah, listen, I'm a fan of Lomachenko. That's what I'm saying. I wasn't hating on the guy. When people saying it's very common nowadays if you utter an adverse comment or something, or you disagree with the common trends about certain people turn around and label you a hater. I'm not a hater. I love watching Lomachenko. The point I was making is that if we're going to judge him by those high standards, you cannot say that a guy's elite when he's lost to a journeyman. I mean, Salido had double-digit losses when he fought Lomachenko. You know what I mean? He was halfway out the ring and halfway in the ring and halfway being an Uber driver when he took that fight. The only reason why they gave Lomachenko that fight is they considered Salido a bit of a soft touch and a name on Lomachenko's record on the way to him securing a title shot. So, and he lost to him, you know what I mean? And it wasn't that close. He lost to him. Yeah. Secondly, he lost to Lopez. Now, Lopez is a very talented fighter, young, strong, big for the weight. Yes. But Lomachenko was considered as an all-time great by some people before he put in the work. So I'm saying that the fact that he lost to these guys, you cannot consider him up there as an elite fighter in the same way you would do Floyd, Manny Pacquiao, people like that. You know, your Ali, your Leonards, you know, I mean, so many other guys I could name. You know what I mean? I don't want to be unfair to lots of the other great champions, you know what I mean? So that's where I was going with that one. I'm not saying he's not a great fighter, and he's a great talent. He's great to watch. But are you really going to put him up there with the all-time greats after what you've seen a couple of Saturdays ago? No. Hell no.
What about the other comment about the gut check? Because there's like some of them are checking you and saying, look, Linares, that was a gut check. Put him down. He got back up and he went on to win pretty easily. So what's your response to that?
My response to that would be that the Linares fight, which I watched live, and yes, it was a good fight, I would regard that as a partial gut check. And I'll tell you why I use the word partial. Because both before and after the knockdown, Lomachenko was dominating that fight. Yeah? He was dominating that fight. He got caught by a good shot. He was more of a flash knockdown than anything else. It wasn't like he got knocked down and, you know what I mean, he was walking around not in control of his legs and stuff like that. So, yeah, I would say that was a partial gut check. If some people want to say that's a proper gut check, then that's their definition. They're using their own criteria, like I am mine. But I wouldn't say that's proper gut check. Proper gut check is when you're in deep waters, man, and you survive it, and you swim and you make it to the other end successfully. That Linares wasn't like that, was it? Tell me if I'm wrong. Do you think that was a proper gut check fight?
I think he was I think you're right. I think he was in control of the fight from round one towards the knockdown. Yeah. And then when he got knocked down, he got straight back up. It wasn't hurt. He wasn't like, his legs weren't wobbly. And then he fought on and he went on to win pretty handily. So, yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what the comments were saying as well. I mean, he's been put down and he fought back and he did well. But, yeah, in terms of a gut check, I'm thinking like when Floyd was rocked in that second round by Shane Mosley, big time. And then he came back in the third and fought back, showed tremendous heart there and toughness. Like that's the sort of gut check I think you're referring to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the last thing on Lomachenko before we move on, the resume, because that was obviously what people were calling into question as well. You look at somebody. Okay, he lost to Salido, but look who he's beaten in as many fights. He's beaten the likes of Gary Russell, Nicholas Walters, Rigondeaux, Linares, Luke Campbell. Titles in as many weight divisions. What is it? 3 weight divisions. So what's your just your final say on that?
My response to that is that yes, those fighters you named are very talented fighters, but I would suggest that those fighters are not guys that you would put on your record and say that equates him to being an elite fighter.
Not Rigondeaux?
Oh, come on, man. The Rigondeaux thing was the man was moving up 2 weights. Rigondeaux was at least 40 years old when he got in that ring. I felt sorry for the way they treated Rigondeaux in that fight, man. Rigondeaux, you know what? Listen, the way he beat Rigondeaux, he absolutely outclassed him and everything else. So you can't argue with the manner of the victory. But what I'm saying is I'm less impressed then by that victory than I was, say, the Gary Russell or the Luke Campbell victories. To me, they were much more meaningful. Rigondeaux was basically a lamb to slaughter. I actually felt sorry for Rigondeaux. And I'm going to say something that's mildly controversial, or some maybe pretty controversial. I don't blame Rigondeaux for quitting in that fight. You know what I mean?
Why?
No, I don't, because like the guy...
He wasn't seriously hurt. He wasn't getting... Well, it's not free for me to say that. But on the outside, as an outsider watching, it didn't look like he was getting punched up and, he was like, he just looked like he thought, you know what, I can't be bothered for this. I've had enough. I'm going to quit. Yeah,
well, Rigo realised pretty soon that he was in with a younger, stronger, and at that time, more talented fighter. And it had gone up in 2 weight classes. You know what I mean? Like, so by the time Lomachenko got in the ring, he was probably about a welterweight in there, fighting a guy that's coming up from bantamweight.
People will say that about Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez.
No, but the differential wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Because don't forget, Lomachenko has been campaigning as a lightweight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And by all intents and purposes, my research would suggest that Rigondeaux was basically forced into taking that fight. My research would suggest that. I mean, this is a conversation for another day. But I actually felt sorry for him. And like I said, I know it's going to be controversial to some people, but I can see why he would have wanted out in that fight. You know what I mean? Because behind the scenes, trust me, he was treated very badly before that fight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He wasn't getting the work, and he was basically had a gun put to his head and say, you need to take this fight. You know? So that's things that the man in the street probably wouldn't have heard about. But, you know, I've got my contacts. I know certain people in the trade, and I've been told certain things. But yeah, so yes, Lomachenko was absolutely the better man on the night. That's what I expected. Anyone that was predicting that Rigondeaux was going to win that fight before the fight, then I'm sorry. They hadn't done their homework, and they don't really know boxing that well. So, you know. But yeah, the resume, listen, I saw a guy sarcastically on one of the YouTube channels describe Lomachenko as the greatest 14-2 fighter that he'd ever seen. And it did make me chuckle when I heard that, you know what I mean? But like I said, man, I just not having this that he's up there with the all-time greats. I'm sorry, I can't. Like I said, in that fight, where were the step arounds? Where was the footwork? Where was the speed? Where was the angles? All these praise that had been showered with before. We didn't see any of that on the night. The guy basically gave up the first 6-7 rounds. When have you ever seen Manny Pacquiao do that, or Floyd? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These are all-time great fighters of this generation. Have you ever seen them do that? No. You know what I mean? So, and you have to also factor into that he was fighting a 23-year-old guy who hadn't fought at this level before, other than when he fought Richard Comey, who he knocked out in 2 rounds. So it's not as if you can say, well, he was a seasoned fighter. He wasn't. He's fairly green. And even in the win, I look back at that fight again, there was some things he could have done to accentuate the victory, which he didn't do. And I'm not criticizing him, because this will come with experience, you know? So when I take all those things into consideration, there is no way I can anoint Lomachenko as this so-called greatest of all time. I think where some people are going wrong is that they look at the skills, they see him beating up on some of the other guys that he's fought, who incidentally, like Rigondeaux, have been older and younger, and you know what I mean, than himself. Sorry, younger and older, older and smaller than himself.
Yeah. And
we're seeing, you know, the step arounds and the matador stuff and the angles and the speed, and everyone's kind of got carried away. So yeah, that's what I think, man. I've seen nothing. I've watched the fight back. I've watched your show back. I've looked at the comments. I've taken everything into consideration. And I'm sorry, I'm not changing my point of view, man. If anything, I'm doubling down on what I said before. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm doubling down, bro.
Well, look, I appreciate you.
Interesting as well. I would love to see where he goes from here, because I don't think he doesn't sound to me like he wants his rematch.
Well, I think I saw an article on Boxing Scene saying that he wanted a rematch, but that was quite recent. I don't know if you've been on there recently. But yeah, I'm getting mixed signals, to be honest.
Yeah, we're getting mixed signals, and we also got a litany of excuses after the fight. And then I subsequently saw an interview with him where he said, I just couldn't get to the guy. He was too big and too strong. So if he's saying that openly in public, that would suggest to me that he doesn't really want a rematch. Maybe Igor Klimas wants a rematch, being the brave promoter that he is. But Lomachenko, having gone through the fire, he's probably thinking, you know what, maybe I'll take my career in a slightly different direction. And you know what, I probably don't blame him, because based on what I saw in that fight, and given the sort of personality what Lopez is, he's probably gained, his confidence after that fight has grown exponentially. If they fight again, I reckon he'll be looking to stop Lomachenko. And I reckon he'd probably do it as well. I think he'd get him out of there, man, before the 10th round.
I'm curious to see where Loma does go from here, actually. Because like you said, there's a lot of young bucks on the way up. We got some of them fighting each other. Luke Campbell and Ryan Garcia. Gervonta Davis is in action this weekend against Santa Cruz. I know it's a weight below, but it's assumed that he'll move back up. You've got Devin Haney fighting Gamboa. You know, they're all kind of circling around each other at the moment, and Teofimo Lopez seems to want to get on with it in a hurry. So before he moves up. So where does Lomachenko go? I wonder if he stays and wants to solidify himself at lightweight, or does he drop back down at a more comfortable weight for him? Probably dominate down there. Like, well, I wonder what he does. I'm looking forward to seeing that, actually.
Yeah. Because listen, it's not over for him, obviously. Very talented fighter. Obviously, he's still got a lot of his skill sets still there. So I would imagine he'll move down to 130 and pursue his options there. Because let's face it, he's a big name in the sport. He will get the fights. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Options there. And I'm sure him and his team will sit down and work out what is the best option for him.
Yeah.
But it won't be a young, hungry, strong guy with a big punch. You see, this is a time of his career now where we need to be very careful in choosing his fights going forward. And listen, I haven't got a problem with that. The best fighters do that. I mean, you see Manny Pacquiao, he's around at age 41. They will start to target certain guys who they think they can beat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, if he's going to prolong his career, that's what he needs to do, because he ain't going to want to go near a young, hungry lion who can punch. I don't think that's the best forward. And I just would like to say, before we close this segment of your show, I saw a YouTube channel, I'm not going to name it, but there was a YouTube channel out there that posted a series of interviews. One of them was with Lomachenko prior to the fight. And this is something that I touched on last week on your show. And I hadn't seen this interview before I spoke on your show last week. Otherwise, I would have done. But basically, it was an interview of Lomachenko a few days before the fight. And he was being asked how his training camp had gone. And as usual, he gave the usual spiel about, you know, it's been a great camp, blah, blah, blah. But the interesting thing about this interview, he was actually asked about his shoulder. He was asked about the shoulder. So, look, you've had an operation in the previous year. How is the shoulder shaping up? He said, listen, shoulder's fine. I've had absolutely no problems. He said, I'm actually doing things now that I wasn't doing last year. So yeah, I say that to dispel this myth about the shoulder being the problem. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's had an operation, yes, but don't be fooled by that, because fighters, what they will tend to do is that if they've had niggling injuries with a shoulder or something like that, then they will have the operation after the fight, regardless of whether they win or lose. So, for example, Andre Ward had serious problems with his shoulder. He was unbeaten in the ring, but he had his operations after his fights. So people saying, oh, look, the fact that he had the operation proves that that was the reason why he lost the fight. No, don't be fooled by that.
Well, let's move on anyway. Let's talk about his Ukrainian compatriot, Alexander Usyk, who is in action this weekend against Derek Chisora, live on Sky Box Office pay-per-view. Now, before we get into the fight, are you going to order the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I probably will.
Undercard ain't that great, though, is it?
No, I mean, I was going to qualify it by saying I don't think it's a pay-per-view fight, to be honest. There's no title on the line. A lot of people don't. For all Usyk's outstanding talent and the stuff he's accomplished in his career, I don't think he's a big enough name for the casual fans or the people who are not that familiar with boxing for that to be a pay-per-view fight. The kind of people that are going to buy that fight are people like me and you, man, you know what I mean, who love boxing, and we haven't got that much else to do on Saturday anyway. So you're probably, I mean, I saw a video with David Hay, and he's a brilliant salesman, by the way. And he was like giving the reasons why people should buy the fight. And that's what he was basically saying, is that what else are you going to do on Saturday? You know what I mean? So tune in. And I think that's how they will get a lot of their views. It'll be interesting to see the amount of the numbers that they get for this fight. I don't think it will be that high, to be honest.
It's an intriguing fight for me. It's not necessarily one that's hard for me to make a prediction on, and I'll just say it right now. I think that Usyk is going to win this, but it's an intriguing fight because as for all of his accomplishments at cruiserweight, you know, he was a dominant, one of the best cruiserweights of all time, for sure, Alexander Usyk. In such a short amount of time, you know, he became undisputed champion, fought terrific competition on the way as the away fighter as well. Let's remember that. He fought a lot of these guys in their own backyards. So as a cruiserweight, his resume is amazing. Gold medal as an amateur, moved up to heavyweight now is a totally different ball game. You know, these are heavyweights. Like when this guy, a fight could end with one punch. And what we want to see, what's intriguing about this fight, and just Usyk's heavyweight adventure overall, is he going to be able to take a punch up there? Because he's going to be going up against guys that are a lot bigger than him, a lot heavier, punch a lot harder. And until we see his chin tested, then I think that's going to decide for me how he gets on. He's got all the skills in the world. He's got the skills to cause anybody problems. But we want to see what the whiskers are like. And I think Derek Chisora does have the potential to test those whiskers. But for me, I just think that Alexander Usyk is going to be a problem for Chisora all night. I think he's going to create angles for him. He's got a great jab. I think that Chisora kind of feeds off the crowd, the energy, and there's not going to be any fans in the arena. And I think he's going to get frustrated from early. And I could just see Usyk winning, maybe even a late stoppage, you know. Maybe it could get to a point where Chisora in round 10, he's getting confused, he's getting angry, he's getting frustrated, and then Usyk just starts piling it on and stops him, or on points. I can see either way happening, because he'll be aware of the danger that Chisora brings. And I'm not ruling Chisora out completely, but that's kind of how I'm observing this fight.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you pretty much summed up there what I was going to say. So, yeah, you said it, man. I mean, listen, I would love to see Derek win this fight. This fight for Derek is like his world title. You know what I mean? He's had a couple of opportunities before. He's come up short. He's been a bit of a late bloomer. I think that connection with David A has worked really well for him. He's found religion. He's a different man now. He looks far more relaxed and at peace with himself. And I think that will help him in the ring as well. That being said, man, I mean, he's up against a very, very good fighter, an outstanding fighter, a very, very skilled fighter. So the only disadvantage in this fight for Usyk is that he's giving away a couple of stones, you know what I mean? But the skill set and everything else, you would have to say that Usyk is the superior guy. So as much as I'd love to see Derek win, I've met Derek a couple of times as well. Very nice guy, very engaging, solid pro, been around forever. Good amateur as well, won the ABAs in less than a year of him coming over from Africa, apparently. So listen, I'd love to see him win, but I have to say I can't see it. What will be interesting, though, will be to see if Derek can, like, push him on the back foot, rough him up a bit. Well, not rough him up a bit, rough him up a lot, he'll have to. Because Usyk, you know, he can handle. I mean, we see when he fought guys like Gassiev and Bradis and people like that. There were strong guys with big punches. And he handled those guys all right. He's fought Beterbiev in the amateurs. They got a win apiece. So, yeah, man, Derek is definitely up against it. But we're hoping that with his greater conditioning that we've been told, the work he's been putting in, the natural size advantage he's got, and with the will and determination that he's acquired, we're hoping that he'll make a really good effort of himself. And push Usyk. So I think I'm kind of looking at that more. That will be Derek's moral victory, because I can't see him winning the fight, if I'm being honest. I really hope he does, but I can't see him winning. Unless
if I'm Derek, literally
attack him with that big overhand right, he's going to need something like that.
I think he just needs to stay in his chest, man. Like Eddie Hearn said on his IFL interview, we'll get into that a bit later. He needs to really just stay on his chest, be the ball, rush him, just admit to yourself, like a bit like how Orlando Salido approached Lomachenko. Know that you're going to take a couple going in and just get in his chest and rough him up. Hit him, like be a bit dirty, you know, like just rough him up a little bit, let him know, look, this is the heavyweight division. This ain't no cruiserweight division. You're in the heavyweights now. You know, that last opponent you had, Witherspoon, that wasn't a test. This is your test now. And just start winging at him. You know, body, you know, he's going to block, he's going to move around, but he needs to really just, you know, go in his chest and just swing. Because I can't really see, he's not going to be able to beat him from the outside, is he?
No.
He's going to have to go in his chest.
I mean, listen, you're right there, but I think that's easier said than done. I mean, for example, I've heard of stories, more than one actually, of people saying that Usyk, who sparred a lot of heavyweights in the past, and they've tried to rough him up and he's been able to get the better of him. I mean, I heard stories years ago that he was not just dealing with Vladimir Klitschko in sparring, he was manhandling him.
Yeah.
To the point where Klitschko didn't want to use him as a sparring partner anymore.
Heard that.
Okay,
Yeah.
different type of style. But you can also look at it and say that Klitschko is a bigger heavyweight and stronger than Derek. 6'7", big jab, big, you know what I mean? Big guy, big dimensions. And yet Usyk was able to overcome it. Yes, it's sparring, but you know, those kind of things just give you an indicator of how talented this guy is. And like I said, he's been in with pressure fighters before, Marius Bradis, Murat Gassiev, and he's come through it. I think that Marco Huck gave him a decent fight.
And I think Bradis gave him his toughest fight as a pro.
I'll tell you a guy that has beaten Usyk that some of your viewers may not know, a certain Sean Porter. Yes, yeah. Welterweight Sean Porter.
It's unbelievable that is. It's just unbelievable stuff.
Win over Usyk, man. You know what I mean? So
Usyk did beat Joe Joyce in the World Series of Boxing.
Yeah,
didn't he?
I watched that fight. Yeah, he did.
Which is like a semi. For those that don't know, it's like a semi-professional sort of tournament, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not quite amateur, not quite pro, but
it's like a hybrid. It's like a hybrid of your top amateurs and the pros, and boxing for the same team that Lomachenko was boxing for. And I saw that fight, and to be honest, he did handle Joe quite easily in that fight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yes, we're talking about an exceptionally talented guy that ticks all the boxes. You know what I mean? So Derek is going to have to fight out of his skin. He's going to have to produce the sort of performance on Saturday at 36 years old after 40-odd fights. And some of those have been very hard fights. Some of those fights, he's been KO'd and stuff like that. You're asking him to turn back the challenge of one of the best fighters, pound for pound, right now. I just can't see it, man. Like I said, man, boxing's a funny game. Boxing's a funny game. You might rough him up, you might tire him, and then 8, 9, 10, 11, when Usyk's feeling, wow, I'm tired in there, boom, overcomes the overhand right, and he's out of there. You never know. But because I can't see Derek beating him on points.
No. It's intriguing. It's intriguing. I'd say, what's your final prediction for that before we get on to the other fights of the weekend?
I think I agree with what you said earlier, either a wide points win or a late stoppage for Usyk.
I just think that crowd, man, I really think he would have fed off that crowd at the O2. If they were there, you know, it might have allowed him to get the extra step, but nobody there, you know what I mean? You're getting punched from all angles from Usyk. I just think...
People said that when Usyk fought Tony Bellew. You see, what you got to remember is Usyk's a much-travelled fighter, both as an amateur, in the WSB and as a pro already. He's had a lot of fights abroad. So he's fought in hostile territory, you know what I mean? And he's always overcome it. So to be honest with you, I don't really think that would be a factor. When you fought at the level that Usyk's fought, and you've won gold medals and you've been representing your country in international tournaments and you've won the World Series of Boxing, fighting in different territories, you know what I mean? He's not going to be intimidated by guys singing Sweet Caroline and all that type of stuff, you know what I mean? So, you know, as much as it would be great to have the crowd there, the top guys, man, they are not going to be intimidated by the crowd. I don't see that happening. The way the crowd will intimidate fighters if they were young guys. So, for example, and I know we may talk about this in the future, for example, if Luke Campbell was fighting Ryan Garcia in Hull, and we all know that Ryan Garcia is a very talented fighter, but he's not that experienced, certainly in terms of international experience. If they fought over here and Luke was able to get him in front of his fans in Hull or wherever or anywhere in England, he could create that kind of hostile atmosphere that might get to Ryan Garcia in certain ways. When I say get to, it might get him to fight out of his normal style. But with a guy like Usyk, who's had well over 100 fights as an amateur, traveled the world, won all these different medals as an amateur, turned pro, won different titles in different countries, he's not going to be intimidated by that, man. Not at all. No,
I agree. I was thinking more for Chisora. It might lift him, but yeah, still the result for me is the same in that fight anyway. But moving on, we've got Gervonta Tank Davis, who is taking on Leo Santa Cruz. Now, Gervonta Davis was campaigning as a lightweight. I think he won a regular title up at lightweight. I can't even keep up anymore. But then he's dropped back down to fight Leo Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz only had the one defeat, hasn't he, to Carl Frampton in his career. Well-travelled fight. I mean, he's had a long career. What's your thoughts on that fight, first of all, and how do you see it going? Well, was you disappointed like me that Gervonta Davis dropped back down, or do you kind of recognize, the opportunity? Leo Santa Cruz is a big name. It's a popular fight really over that side of the world. And what's your thoughts on that? Would you have preferred Gervonta Davis to stay at lightweight, or are you happy that he's moved back down and he could always move back up?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, listen, I was disappointed with that catchweight stuff, to be honest. I don't really like catchweights at the best of times. And this is an example of why I don't like them. And Gervonta Davis is severely disadvantaged. So I think him going down 5 pounds or whatever doesn't sound a whole lot. But when you're thinking that Gervonta struggled to make lightweight in his last couple of fights, now he's having to boil himself down to this weight. Notoriously, he blows up between fights as well.
Yeah.
But you know what? In terms of the actual fight, I have to say that when this fight was first announced, I wasn't that excited about it. I just kind of wrote it off and said, yeah, you know what? Gervonta will crush him. You know what I mean? That's how I looked at the two fighters and I just thought, you know what? Gervonta should deal with him fairly comprehensively. But the more and more I think about it, man, I think this could be a better fight than I first gave it credit for, because of the fact we just mentioned about the weights, and also the fact that if you look at Leo Santa Cruz's style, it's kind of wrong for Gervonta.
Yep.
Long for the weight, long reach. He can box when he wants to.
Throws a lot of punches.
Like with Frampton, he can box and he can move. And one thing about Santa Cruz is that he throws a hell of a lot of punches, man.
Yeah.
So it's one of them that if Gervonta's not got him out of there, man, by the halfway mark, it could be a long night for him. And you have to also say that I may have underestimated Leo's chin. He's got a good chin, man.
Yeah.
Carl Frampton can punch a bit, and he couldn't put a dent in him. I mean, I know he staggered him backwards in the first fight, I think it was. But the second fight, I was very impressed with the way he dealt with Frampton. Really comfortably, if I'm being honest. And
if
Gervonta, a good fight.
If Gervonta Davis is not on form, and we've seen him go into fights where he's not looked motivated, particularly I think he was against Fonseca on the undercard of Mayweather McGregor. Yeah. He just did not look up for it at all. He couldn't be bothered, it looked like.
Not just that. I think Gervonta is one of those fighters. He's in love with his own power. So if he don't get you out of there early, it's almost like he kind of loses concentration a bit.
Yeah.
He loses focus. I've seen that a few times. He even did it with Gamboa. He went out there, let his hands go. He couldn't get Gamboa out of there early. And so there were times in that fight, man, when he was huffing and puffing and looking bereft of ideas. And if he's doing that with Leo, and Leo's moving side to side and hitting him with all these punches, okay, they may not hurt him, but they're point-scoring punches.
Yeah.
You never know, man. This could be a big upset. So I was guilty of writing this fight off and dismissing it. But the more I think about it, the more I'm actually looking forward to seeing it. And of course, it could end early, because Gervonta, as we all know, man, is a supremely talented guy. He can punch with both hands and he loves a fight. So I think tactically, if Gervonta is not at the races tactically, and with his focus is not quite right, and then on the other side of things, if Leo comes in there with the right tactics, he definitely will be focused. He's even said he's fighting for his dad. I know, you will know, as a lot of the viewers will know, that his dad has cancer and he's had a lot of health problems, and they're a very close family unit. And Leo has said on a number of occasions leading up to this fight that he's dedicating this to his dad. So he seems supremely motivated, man. Remember a certain Boston Douglas, when he fought Tyson, he said that he was motivated by what had happened with his mum.
His mum.
So, sorry, not his mum, it was his dad, wasn't it?
So it was his mum.
It was one of, okay, right, okay. He lost a parent, yeah. And you saw how that turned out. So, and that was another massive upset. So I'm leaning towards, I'm still going for Gervonta, because I think, again, he's the younger, stronger guy. But there are elements there, man, that make me think that if there is an upset that takes place, it wouldn't be the biggest shock in the world. Not for me, anyway.
I agree. I'm tending to lean towards Davis, because I think he will be motivated for this fight. But I'm not writing off Santa Cruz like you I was. But now I can't do it now, especially after watching the Showtime documentary, like the 24/7 type shows that they've been doing, the All Access with that. I kind of, I felt quite guilty actually for writing off Santa Cruz so quick afterward, because I just kind of remembered how good a fighter he actually is, how well traveled he is. He's a tough man. So it'll be a good fight, man. And one more fight this weekend that a lot of people are talking about is Nawa Inoue, the bantamweight world champion, taking on Jason Maloney, based in Australia, the Irishman. Now, for me, Inoue has got to be up there, top 5 pound for pound for sure. I think what he did in the World Boxing Super Series, he kind of cleaned up at bantamweight, didn't he? He's got most of the belts there. He hasn't got all the belts, I don't think. But Jason Maloney, in my opinion, he's a top 10 ranked fighter. But I just think now Inoue at the moment he's just a freak train. He's knocking people out down there.
I can only see this fight going one way. Fair play to Maloney. He seems to believe in himself. He's talking a good game. You know what I mean? So I'm sure he'll do his best and represent himself well. But I can't look no further than Monster Inoue. They don't call him Monster for nothing, man. In a way, he campaigns at those weight classes, you know what I mean? Because they don't really get the recognition they deserve sometimes.
Yeah, it's good to see him in the limelight. It's good to see he's being recognised for what he's doing. I mean, he possesses a lot of power. Pound for pound, one of the hardest punchers in the sport.
Yeah. And that power is in both hands.
Yeah.
A lot of times with fighters, the power is predominantly in one hand. Inoue is one of those rare fighters that are blessed with supreme power in both hands. So that's very hard to keep somebody off you who's got that kind of power in both hands. Gervonta Davis is a bit similar, He's got power in both hands. Okay, his left hook is, but he can hit with either hand. And when you get guys like that, they don't have to load up. You know what I mean? They don't have to work you onto one particular side. Whichever side you go, they've got something waiting for you. You know what I mean? So doubly dangerous. So I can't see anything other than a resounding Inoue win. Credit to Maloney for taking the fight. I like the way he's conducting himself. He's basically showing no fear before the fight anyway. Obviously, different matter when you get in the ring, but he seems to be genuinely confident. Like I said, he's talking a good game. So let's see how he goes.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. It's going to be one of those late nights, I think, where we're going to be up till about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, man, with the boxing that's on. But I'm not complaining. Yeah, I'm happy, but I'm looking forward to the weekend. And for those that are watching the podcast, don't forget I'll be going on Fan Talk straight after Usyk Chisora. So I'll be on the stream just like this. And if you want to get your thoughts and opinions on that fight or the upcoming fights later on that evening, we can talk about it. So feel free to let me know if you want to jump on. But anyway, as we move on, man, I wanted to speak to you about an interview on IFL TV that's been doing the rounds this week. Went quite viral. First of all, Kell Brook, who is taking on Terence Crawford in November. He basically kind of slaughtered Eddie Hearn in that interview, man. I was like, wow. Like, he was quite public with it. And basically, just to kind of summarize, he was saying that he felt a bit let down from Eddie Hearn. He had the Crawford fight, approached Sky to try and get that on Sky. He felt that Eddie Hearn kind of turned his back on him, hasn't really spoke to him a lot. And he felt a bit betrayed by Eddie Hearn, and he said that he's been there for one of the longest time, he's one of Eddie Hearn's longest guys on that roster, that Matchroom Boxing roster. And he felt a bit let down. And then Eddie Hearn did he responded to those claims in another interview a few days later, and he was really angry. And it's the first time that I've actually seen Eddie Hearn really passionate and quite angry, because normally he keeps a cool head, have a bit of banter, but this time he felt really upset, man. He felt he wanted to address those claims from Kell Brook. He said, if you want to talk about loyalty, then look at what I've done for you. Look at this, this, and this. And he said that basically Sky did turn down the offer of broadcasting Crawford and Brook simply because Kell Brook went to Top Rank America and tried to do the deal without him. So let's talk about loyalty in boxing, and let's talk about your thoughts on that, because I'm getting a difference of opinions. Some people are kind of siding with Brook, and then some people are siding with Eddie. So what's your thoughts on it? Have you seen both interviews, and what do you think?
I have. I've seen both interviews, and I was thoroughly entertained by both of them. I also saw a recent interview with Joe Gallagher that was very entertaining.
So, I love Joe Gallagher, man.
Yeah, I love.
People don't like Joe Gallagher, but I love Joe Gallagher, man.
No. Yeah, listen. Credit to Kell Brook for coming out and speaking his truths. You know what I mean? Whether you agree with what he said or not, I think it's insightful for fans like me, you, and everyone else out there to kind of get it to look into that other side of boxing, that kind of murky world that we don't always see. I mean, Eddie likes to hog the limelight. He's a very good speaker. He's a very good promoter. And he's always got camera on, and he's always, you know what I mean? So he dominates that part of things, you know what I mean? But fair play to Kel. He come out there and he spoke his truth. And I have to say, after listening to both, shout out to Coogan Cassius, by the way, on his channel, these interviews coming on. I used to work with Coogan back in the day on his channel, and he's doing some sterling work getting interviews like that. But anyway, to go back to the main point. Yeah, what I was saying is that I can see where Kel's coming from, 100%. I mean, I used to box myself, so my empathy is normally with the fighters on stuff like this. And what Absolutely. I would say to people is this. Kell Brook has had a great career, but recently he's not been getting the fights. He didn't get the Amir Khan fight for whatever reason. And he's kind of been shelved indirectly by Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. You know what I mean? They obviously got their focus on AJ and other fighters. So if you're Kell Brook, you're coming to the twilight end of your career. So he probably thinks, I've got, listen, a couple of big fights still left in, which I'm pretty sure he does have, yeah? He's thinking to himself, well, to all intents and purposes, Matchroom have forgotten about me. They've shelved me. So it would appear that what he's done, he's gone out to America and put himself out there, made himself available. He looks like him and his dad have negotiated this fight with Crawford. He's got the fight, okay? Don't forget, they've gone out there on their own initiative and they've got the fight. Something that he wasn't going to get sitting at home in Sheffield waiting for Eddie Hearn to ring him, because he told us, didn't he? He said, listen, I haven't heard, no one's calling me, you know what I mean? And I've heard a lot of fighters say that with Matchroom and with Warren and guys like that. Once they have a couple of losses on their record, all of a sudden they become yesterday's men and no one wants to know them anymore. This is a brutal sport, man, both in and out the ring. People need to recognize that, you know what I mean? You need to show a little bit of empathy for the fighters and what they must be going through. So yeah, so Kel's gone out there now, sort out the Crawford fight. He's got the fight. His dad's negotiated the terms. And it would appear to me that they want to get the fight on Sky. Now, you could say they want to get it on there for selfish reasons, money. But also, it's a big fight, man. So why wouldn't you want to get it on Sky? You know what I mean? Why not? Because Sky is the biggest broadcaster for boxing in this country, hands down.
Okay, but if you're Eddie Hearn, then
let me finish this point. So terrestrial TV don't want to know. So the biggest broadcaster is going to be Sky, and they think it's a pay-per-view worthy fight, which I think it is, much more so than some of the other pay-per-view fights that have gone in recently. But anyway, so they've gone to Eddie Hearn. Okay, Eddie Hearn's not been involved in the initial negotiations, so Eddie feels slighted that he said they've gone behind his back and done that, but they're saying that the reason why they've gone behind his back is that you weren't doing nothing for us or doing enough for us anyway. They've got the fight. They've asked him for a help in getting the fight on Sky pay-per-view. I don't see why that should be such a big problem for it.
I think maybe he was a bit upset. Like he's like he said in his interview. I mean, should he feel obligated to put that fight on Sky with something that was done without his knowledge? I mean, when he was talking about his loyalties to Kell Brook, and let's face it, over the last however many years, he has been quite loyal with regards to, you know, what happened to him. We've heard some of the stories, you know, particularly the one where he was on holiday abroad, and you know, he nearly lost his leg, and Eddie Hearn flew out there. Some of the people arguing for Eddie Hearn. Now, I'm not doing that. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here. But some of the people arguing for Eddie Hearn will say, you know, Eddie's shown loyalty to you. Your career was kind of like, it should have been here. We didn't really get to where we should have been with your talent. And, you know, in this stage, like, you've gone behind my back to do a deal with a guy that's always slating me. And now you want it on Sky because you couldn't get it on the original platform that you wanted. So why should I help you?
Yeah, you could reasonably make that argument. But like I said, Kell feels he's been shelved. He hasn't been getting the love. And I felt that Eddie was being a little bit disingenuous by bringing up his personal details all the time. You know what I mean? We can all do that. We can all talk about people's personal love. Listen, Kell, we all know, well, a lot of people know I've been hearing stories about Kell. You've heard them. You've heard the stories about Kell Brook. He is definitely not. Definitely hasn't always lived the best life outside the ring. Put it like that. And I'm not talking about usual rumors that surround Kell. We know in the past that he likes to enjoy himself, put it that way, outside the ring, and he gets up to a lot of stuff that fighters shouldn't really do, even when they haven't got fights coming up. That being said, he was one of Eddie's first signings that helped launch our Matchroom brand, I might add. And they've mutually enjoyed great careers with each other. Like I said, this is Kell's twilight years. He's managed to secure this fight. He hasn't heard from Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. He's put in that call to Eddie, said, listen, man, I've negotiated this fight. Can you help me out? I don't see why he couldn't do that. This stuff about the Golovkin thing, listen, Kell saying that he saved the company in doing so. I've heard differing stories. I've heard that it was Kell who came to Eddie and offered himself to take the fight. I've also heard that Eddie was guilty, perhaps, of applying gentle pressure, shall we say, putting it out there and encouraging Kell to take the fight because Chris Eubank, for whatever reason, didn't take the fight. So I'm not at liberty to really say who's right or wrong over that, but I'm just looking at the fighter-promoter dynamic, and I don't see why they couldn't have given the guy a hand.
Yes.
Eddie's always saying it's not personal, no hard feelings. So why is this personal? You know what I mean?
I think he was generally just upset, man, with the comments.
And I've also heard that he works with fighters on a fight-by-fight basis. And it's a long time since Kell Brook has been in the ring fighting for Matchroom. The man's trying to secure his career. You know what I mean? He's only got a couple of fights left at the top.
I agree.
This opportunity, why wouldn't, you know what I mean? Why can't you help him out? I don't see what the big deal is. Okay, you could argue and say he went behind your back, and that, but it's still a business deal, isn't it? It's still a business deal. But hey.
Most of the time, man, in these situations, I side with the fighter. So even though
my empathy for normal, listen, I'm not saying the fighters are always right, but I'm saying I do have a certain amount of empathy for the fighters because at the end of the day, they're the ones going in the ring. I mean, Kell Brook had his jaw, no, sorry, not his jaw, his face fractured twice in fights. You know what I mean? That does take a toll on your career. So he's paid the price, man. Yes, he's been paid well, but he's also paid the price physically and mentally.
Kell Brook as well is not the only one that's spoken out against Eddie Hearn before in the same sort of sentences. You know, Scott Quigg comes to mind. You know, there are other fighters there as well. Luke Campbell comes to mind. After these fighters have suffered losses, it's like if you're not that guy anymore, Eddie Hearn will quickly die. That's why these fighters are on fight-by-fight contracts. That's Eddie Hearn, is this roster too big? Does he have too many fighters?
I think it is. That's the disadvantage to Eddie Hearn of having such a monopoly on British boxing in terms of securing a lot of the top fighters. You can't please them all. You know what I mean? That's why, you know what I mean? It's if you have 6 girlfriends, then it's very hard to please them all. I'm not just talking physically, by the way. You know what I'm saying? So some are going to get preferential treatment. And it would appear to all intents and purposes that if you're Anthony Joshua at the moment, and people like that, and Buatsi and 1 or 2 others, they're getting the limelight. Some of the older guys, like Kell Brook and 1 or 2 others, man, they're not getting any love. So I think that because of that, he feels like he's been shelved at a time when he's desperately in need of that last swan song fight. So
what do you make of?
They've gone over, they've taken the trouble to go over to America, put themselves out there, make themselves available. They've landed this fight. His dad's negotiated the terms, and then they've come to Sky through Eddie and said, look, is it possible that you could put in place some conversations that we might be able to get this on Sky? And Eddie's rebuffed them, and Kell feels away, and I could see why he would do. I can also see why Eddie might have a problem with it, but come on, man, he's a big boy. He's got lots of stuff going on, and importantly, he's not the one in the head shots. So. Yeah.
What do you make of Joe Gallagher's comments about well, he didn't actually really say it, but kind of referencing that there's like a north-south divide. Now, we're based in the south of England, towards London. You're in London. Now, what do you make of Joe Gallagher's comments? Like that, the preferential treatment tends to go towards the southern fighters. I saw his interview as well. And what's your thoughts on that? Do you can you see?
It's an open secret. It's an open secret. It's a bit like the black and white debate, isn't it? It's that elephant in the room. You know what I mean? I'm not going to get into a debate on race matters, but everybody knows what I'm talking about, man. No one can deny what I'm saying. These things do exist. There is a north-south divide in this country, 100%. That's not to say that if you're from the north, you can't enjoy a fantastic career and get the publicity. I mean, you've only got to look at Ricky Hatton, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Great career he had. So I'm not saying, so for people rushing into the comments, oh, what about this? What about that? I'm not saying that, you know what I mean, you cannot be from up north and be successful and enjoy the great career in the lights with all the fans and all the rest, in the publicity and the promotion. I'm just saying it is easier, shall we say, or less difficult for guys down south. And I think it's not just football, sorry. It's not just boxing, it's a lot of other sports. I've heard Wayne Rooney talk about that recently in football as well.
Yeah.
In life, it's happening. It's even happening with regards to COVID, what's going on in Liverpool at the moment and Manchester with the tier 3 and all that type of stuff. So, there is a north-south divide. And going back to Joe Gallagher, again, I give Joe Gallagher credit because he mentioned stuff in that interview that we all know goes on. The railroading of fighters, the lowballing of fighters, offers being presented to them as a fait accompli. These things have been going on long before Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn were even in the game, and they go on to this day. So credit to him for highlighting stuff like that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I just think I'd say as well, it's not just bashing Eddie Hearn here, because it happens across the board with promoters everywhere.
Listen, the minute I started to take an interest in boxing, right, and when I was in the amateurs, I would have conversations in dressing rooms, locker rooms with pros, and they would tell me stories. And I'd be like, what? You're joking. If people only knew what goes on in this game, boxing is a very, very nasty game, man. It's brutal, trust me, both inside and outside the ring. People look at guys like Joshua and people like that who are living their best lives, and I mean, they're on TV, they're on billboards, and they're making copious amounts of money, you know what I mean? And they think that, wow, you know what I mean? But it's, for the vast majority of fighters, 99% of them, they don't get anywhere near that type of money, fame, celebrity. They don't get nothing like that. And it's a brutal sport. So my natural empathy is towards the fighters. Eddie Hearn, and I just want to say this, man, I met Eddie Hearn. He's a very good promoter, excellent promoter. But, he has his way of doing certain things. And some people don't like it, and people are speaking out about it. More power to them. More power to them, man.
Well, last topic before we go. Got about 8 minutes left. I wanted to get your thoughts. It was announced earlier this week that there will be no action towards Terry O'Connor for his scorecard that he presented in the Ritson and Vasquez fight. It was kind of agreed that and settled that he wasn't actually on his phone. He was looking at a scorecard, and I think upon closer examination, it did kind of look like a scorecard, really. However, there was a lot of fury and anger over the scorecards, but it seems that the British Boxing Board of Control, after reviewing it, have kind of said, look, we're not going to take any further action. And it was met, of course, with a lot of negative comments. I saw one comment, particularly from Ewan Boxing, who he comes on this channel sometimes. And he's a white guy from up north. And he said that, we need to kind of rid this this kind of what's happening in the British Boxing Board of Control right now, just like old middle-aged white men, in his words. He said kind of not really, they're outdated, not with it, not kind of like, they're not really, they feel like, oh, well, we know this, and, if you don't know as much as we do, so forget about it, that sort of attitude towards it. And he thinks that could be a part of the problem. Now, I saw an interview on IFL with one of the British Boxing Board of Control stewards. I don't know if he was a steward or he worked within we've worked within the company. And he was quite dismissive of the fan opinion and, the feedback. And I guess it's kind of reflected in that decision where maybe, all right, we don't need to, I'm not asking for anyone to ban Terry O'Connor for life, but maybe just an open explanation as to what happened, why this was the case. But we literally just got a statement saying, no, we're not taking any action. What's your thoughts on that?
Therein lies the problem. Oftentimes, when you get incidents like this happening, not just in refereeing, in all walks of life, and then you're met with that type of resistance by the people concerned who won't admit that there's a problem. That's why there remains a problem. That's why the problem will go on, because they refuse to recognize it, they refuse to acknowledge it, and so they're not going to do anything to address it. I mean, what I said should happen to Terry O'Connor. I just want to say he should be like the standard bearer for all things wrong in refereeing. Because like I said when we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, it's not just him.
Not just him. I don't want people to think
numerous egregious robberies in boxing, man.
And it is a subjective sport.
Exactly. Boxing is a subjective sport. Me and you can both look at the same fight and we can come up with different interpretations of who done what and who should win the fight. But when it was as egregious as that, then clearly something is wrong. So what I would have done is, the first thing you need to do is stand the guy down, have a full and proper investigation, and then you can determine from the outcome of the investigation where you're going to go from there. Definitely this guy either needs to be retrained on what he's supposed to be looking for. You know what I mean? Maybe he's kind of, over the years, he's become a bit complacent and he's lost sight of what he should be doing. It could be a thing like that, you know? Maybe there's a pattern there. If we look back at some of his previous fights, there may be things that he's missing.
Cam Smith, John Ryder.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So maybe the guy's getting old, or maybe he's getting long in the tooth. I don't know. But it needs to be investigated and followed through on.
I just think that dismissive.
But he needs to be stood down, man. I mean, you can't make a bad, in football, when a referee has a really bad game, they stand him down for a couple of weeks and bring in somebody else. So he needs to be stood down. There needs to be an investigation, get to the heart of the matter. What went wrong? Was it just a bad night? Or has this been a pattern over a period of time where he's not quite at it? And if so, maybe they need to stand him down permanently.
I just think this dismissive attitude where it's like, you know, oh, we don't care what you think. You probably had a couple of beers. We ain't going to take into we're not going to take into consideration your opinion. You know, you don't really matter. We're going to do how we do it. That's kind of how it felt. I'm not saying that that's what it was. That's kind of how it felt when they said, yeah, we looked into it and we're not going to do anything. It just rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way, man.
Of course it would. Of course it would. And dare I say, that is what happens when organizations are asked to investigate their own organization. So, for example, we've seen it years ago with the police force. Things happen, a complaint is made, and you get these dubious organizations like the Police Complaints Authority, who are made up of policemen investigating police. And then you wonder why situations never improve, or the situations will just repeat itself over the course of time. Yeah. So, yeah, that's very disappointing that they've taken that stance, if that's what's happened. But there you go. But don't be surprised if this weekend you see a couple of fights and the judges come up with scorecards that you think, what the hell was you watching? Because listen, man, it would have, I couldn't believe that some people, sorry to have to bring it up again, some people were saying that Loma won the fight. I think, was it Teddy Atlas or someone like that I saw, was suggesting that you could easily have given it to, what the hell are you talking about, bro? Lomachenko didn't throw a meaningful punch until the 7th round. He arguably lost the first 6, 7 rounds. He definitely lost the 12th. So take away all the rest of them, the fight is won. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? So, you know. Yeah.
I think it just underlines that it's not just a problem over here. It's not just one judge. Or it's across the board, around the world.
Kind of it can be, like I said, like a cognizant bias thing as well, where people are only looking at one particular person. It may be that Terry O'Connor in that particular fight was focusing most of his energies on Lewis Ritson and not the other guy.
Yeah.
Whether he did it consciously or subconsciously, it would appear that that's what's happened. So
yeah,
he needs to be credible.
Well, listen, man, that brings an end to this week's podcast, and delighted to be joined by yourself again. Thank you for coming on, sharing your opinions. Looking forward to the fight this weekend. Any last words you'd like to say just before we end it?
No, listen, man. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoy coming on. I mean, you know that I do. I work with AFTV, so I do a lot of stuff on there for football. But boxing is a love of mine. Always has been, always will be. And I think you're doing great work, as I said before, man. I know that sounds a bit biased because you're on the Sun, but I watch a lot of different channels. You know what I mean, for different reasons. And with your channel, man, you give it to people like it is. And you've got a lot of factual content on there as well. And I enjoy watching, and I hope the people out there will continue to watch and support you, and that you'll get new followers and subscribers and all the rest of it and views. Yeah, keep up the good work, man. And I'm looking forward to the fights this week.
Will do, man. Well, listen, man, we'll catch you next week. And thanks again for joining us.
I'm looking forward to it, man. Respect.